Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 184th, count them, 184th Green Power Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We are with 36 people to start here. We have an incredibly full agenda today. We're going to start with, if Mimi joins us, we're going to start with a great poem from Mimi Gurman. I don't see her with us now, but we're going to go straight to ANDRA WATKINS, who's talking to us from Spain about Project 2025, the great Trump agenda for the end of the world here, at least end of democracy. Then we have Nancy Larson from Ohio, still part of the United States, I believe, and home of J.D. Vance, who don't get me going. And then we got Andrea and Ray are going to join us. Andrea Miller and Ray McClendon are going to give us the overview on the astounding developments in our electoral politics and tell us what they think from a grassroots standpoint of Kamala Harris and how that's going to affect the upcoming election. We are nonpartisan, but you are allowed to express your opinions on who and what is happening. Dr. Nancy Niparko, then, speaking of which, is going to give us a psychoanalysis of Donald Trump, which will be very interesting. She is a doctor and a neurologist, which will be a very interesting perspective to hear about Donald Trump, especially since he took all that acid. Lori Grace is going to join us then and talk to us about Project 2025 and Agenda 47, which I just started to look up, which is a whole other ball of wax to be sure. And then second hour, we can get to Michael Tabor and talk about agriculture, organic food, and all that stuff. So we've got a great agenda. We're joined by Tatanka Bricka, the erstwhile chair of the KPFK board here in Los Angeles, KPFK Radio, where our California Solartopia show airs on Wednesdays at 5. Tatanka, it's great to see you. We also, if you can, maybe give us an update on Leonard Peltier. We do not want to lose track of him. I'm just hoping that Biden will commute his sentence before he leaves office, but we'll see if that's a pipe dream or not. But at any rate, Andra Watkins, why don't you start us off? You were in Spain, which I'm sure you're researching how to escape from the United States if Trump wins. So if you'll give us the report on what it takes to become a citizen of Spain and how we can resist deportation, that would be good. But in the meantime, you've written quite extensively about Project 2025, and then behind it there's Agenda 47. But can you give us a basic idea? I'm sure most people on the call know what Project 2025 is. If you can tell us what's in there, that would be great.
All right. I started writing about Project 2025 on Substack in January. My Substack is called How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. I'm a survivor of Christian nationalism. I grew up in one of the founding churches of Jerry Falwell Sr.'s Moral Majority in Florence, South Carolina in the 70s and 80s. So the breeding ground of this brand of Christian nationalism that we're all seeing today. So when I picked up Project 2025 and read it, I immediately saw Bible verses in this Christian nationalist language that I was indoctrinated in as a child, embedded within this almost 1,000-page manifesto. So I was probably the first person who called it a Christo-Fascist manifesto. Lots of people are calling it those things now, but nobody was calling it that in January. So I started writing about it from that perspective. And I assume you want to hear some about the environmental
we can start with
that. Of Project 2025.
That's good.
Okay.
I thought that the document was actually written in Yiddish. Is that wrong? Go ahead.
No, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Okay.
It's written in evangelicalese. That's the language that Christian nationalists speak, and I was indoctrinated in. So if you didn't grow up in that, you just speed bump over a lot of that language, and they take for granted that you will. So I've spent 6 months translating that language for people who don't know it and pointing it out in this document. Obviously, Project 2025 would be terrible for the planet. It has policies that will destroy the planet. We've obviously heard about its aims to drill, 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 and it's funded in part by the billionaire oil oligarch industry. And so they want to outlaw the mention of climate change. They use terms like climate radicalism, and they don't want the government to be talking about climate change, to be doing research about climate change. They want unlimited drilling and unlimited extraction, which is something that a lot of people haven't talked so much about. It's really a drill, 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 and extract, extract, extract policy agenda. So one of their worst things that hasn't been written as much about is the impact that it would have on a state like Alaska. They want to extract every mineral that they can get out of the ground there, in addition to every bit of fossil fuel that they can get out of the ground. And they have specific projects already lined up that they want to do in Alaska that would decimate much of the state.
Well, now, I've wondered about this. Is the connection between evangelicalism and the oil and gas industry, or what I call King Kong, coal, oil, nukes, and gas, is it strictly because of the money? Is there something in the Bible? Did Jesus love carbon emissions? I mean, where does this come from?
No, it's even crazier than that. So Christian nationalists have two different schools of thought about the end of the world. I grew up in the school of thought that says the last days of the planet started in 1948 when Israel was regathered as a nation, and that generation will not pass before Jesus comes back in all of his glory and destroys this version of Earth and rebuilds a new one for the elect. So why do we need to care about the planet when God's going to destroy it in 25 years or less anyway? So I grew up believing that. They genuinely believe that's what is going to happen. They believe their Bibles say that. And they let that rule everything they do legislatively. So it's horrifying to have people like that who make decisions based on those things at every level of government in our society. Then you have the dominionist Christian nationalists, which have a different apocalyptic version of the end of the world, and they believe we're living in that time, and it is their job to take over all avenues of power and force the whole world to be Christian nationalist perfect so that Jesus can come back to that perfect world that they've created. Either way, it's bad, and that's why they're so aligned and perfect for these billionaires to use to subjugate and control people.
So you think the chicken, it was this crazy Christian nationalist belief, and then the billionaires just came along. I mean, I have been a student of the Puritans, the English Puritans who came and made Boston a living hell in the early 1600s. And, you know, you wonder where this stuff comes from, but you're mentioning the elect, that is the chosen of God, white guys with a lot of money, basically, and hating people of color, and not too fond of Jews either. But you know, and you grew up in that.
I did.
And what got you out? I mean, did you hear like the Beatles or something? I mean, what?
No. I was a really big Republican into my early 30s and was highly indoctrinated in that world. And at 32, I had a falling out with a close family member that caused me to start questioning some things for the first time, because you're taught never to question anything. So you never do.
Yes. Well,
and so I started questioning things and started reading different historical pieces by academics. And it was a whole different history from what I learned, because I learned the Christian nationalist history. We were founded as a Christian nation. People came here, you know, to worship Christian nationalist God. It was meant to be a white Christian nation. Slaves were happy on the plantation. I mean, all of that is what I learned growing up in a Christian nationalist Christian school. We used textbooks from Bob Jones University. So I was fully indoctrinated in that, to read different kinds of history books by actual historians and realize that a lot of what I learned in that environment was wrong, made me more interested in learning what else I'd learned that was wrong. So I spent close to 10 years, maybe more than 10 years, deprogramming myself and re-educating myself as an adult with real information.
It's great to know. It's great to know it's possible that that can happen. So the Puritan belief, which I assume is shared in 2025, is that the United States will be run by white men who have a lot of money, and that women are subservient, and of course abortion is unthinkable, and not because they're pro-life, for God's sakes. It's always intrigued me how people can say abortion, kills a living child, and then turn around and support the death penalty. That one really kind of blows my mind. But nonetheless, what else is in there? So they also support nuclear power, I believe, right?
Yes, they want a huge investment in more nuclear power and nuclear weapons. It will create another nuclear arms race. They're very intent on getting as many nuclear weapons produced as possible.
God, it's terrifying. Well, that's the attraction of these small modular reactors, because they're the fuel in the small reactors. We're all hearing all these wonderful.
Sluggo, you got muted.
Okay, the only wonderful thing about small modular reactors is that they don't exist. But tell us about civil liberties under the Project 2025. What is the view of these people of the First Amendment and the right to free speech?
They have a right to free speech, but no one else will. So if you want to parrot what they agree with, then of course it's fine, but otherwise it won't be. One of the biggest scary things for me about what the Supreme Court has already done and red states are already doing to penalize and felonize protesters who protest peacefully. That would have a huge impact on environmental protests, obviously, but all kinds of protests. Texas has passed laws allowing people to drive cars through crowds of protesters without penalty. Florida has passed laws making it a felony arrest to block a street or a passageway in a peaceful protest. And of course, if you're convicted of a felony, you can't vote. You lose your right to vote. So the implications for how they plan to punish and are already trying to punish people who disagree with them are pretty significant.
What is your, in addition to the environment and the freedom of speech, in your mind, what is the biggest takeaway from Project 2025? And people,
Project 2025 creates a Christo-Fascist theocracy run by a dictator who will be like the Ayatollah. And I compare them to the Christian Taliban. They will subjugate women. They believe that women need to be back home having children, as many children as God gives them as early as possible in life, and as many as they can have without contraception. They don't need to be educated. Black and brown people don't matter at all. Immigrants don't matter at all. So they have a very strict hierarchical view of what society should be. Christian nationalists will rule us. They see the government as God's avenger on the wrongdoer. That's how they define the government, using their Bibles from a verse in Romans. So if they're the government, then they get to be God's avengers. And that's what they're trying to set up with Project 2025. They will outlaw same-sex marriage, but it will go further than that. They will also make it impossible to live as an LGBTQ person publicly. They will make transgender surgeries and transitions impossible to obtain. And I'm not being hyperbolic. South Carolina, where I live when I'm not in Spain, the major teaching hospital just stopped providing transgender surgery or transgender treatments of all kinds for children and adults because of a bit of verbiage that the horrible good old boy legislature put in a piece of legislation in May. So they're already doing these things in red states.
God, mind-boggling. Dr. Nancy Niparko, did you want to jump in, please? Are you unmuted?
I want to thank you. I admire you for your courage. I'm very proud that you could see through this. I spent a few years, but nothing like you in that world. I wonder how Trump, who publicly admits at different times that he has broken every one of the 10 commandments, how does
he doesn't even know what they are. Come on.
Well, how does the Christian community follow him?
In Trump's world, there's a 10 suggestions. So, but go ahead, tell us, Nancy. How did Trump finish this?
I've asked.
I almost never talk about Trump. In fact, on my Substack, I write his name is 45. I don't say his name. So to me, he is a tool. He is irrelevant. He is a means to an end for the people behind him who we should really be afraid of.
Well,
and so in talking about Project 2025, I talk about the people behind him and expose who those people are, because those are the people we should really be girding ourselves for to fight.
Who do you got in mind? Give us some names.
Well, I mean, J.D. Vance is the exact kind of character that I thought they would choose for him. I thought it would be him or Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton. One of those, you know, it's a hardcore Christian nationalist, young person, white person that he was going to choose. And so he chose someone who could rule. You know, I even put up a scenario where he gets elected. He's obviously unwell. So after he has his retribution purge and gets rid of a bunch of these Christian nationalist enemies, oh, wow, he died in his sleep. How sad. Let's put him in the Capitol Rotunda, and then J.D. Vance can be the dictator for 40 years. You know, that's the kind of scenario that I see them wanting behind the scenes. So it's way more important than we understand who the people behind him are. To me, I just think he's irrelevant.
What are they going to do about J.D. Vance's wife, who's from India, or whose ancestry is Indian?
Well, in any authoritarian regime, the people at the top don't have to live by the same rules that everybody else does. So she'll get to do whatever she wants.
Wow.
She'll be treated differently. And I mean, in India, they have a caste system, and I don't know if she grew up in that. I don't know her background. But having these tiers of society is very accepted in that culture.
You know, he's gotten a lot of hate mail for having a non-white wife. And it's very interesting. A lot of the MAGA faithful are not happy that that they have a nominee whose wife is not of the Aryan.
How surprising. They're such dreadful people. But anyway.
Well, why do you still live in South Carolina? I can understand me. I won't ask you that question. Nancy,
my husband lives there and works there, and that's why.
Oh, okay. And you know, of course, that Florence is the only city in the United States on which the United States dropped 4 nuclear bombs.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Nuclear bombs fell out of an airplane and landed in Florence, South Carolina.
Well, maybe that's what's wrong with me.
2 or 4, but yes, these bombs landed there. They fell out of a B-52, and you should look it up. It's very interesting. Thank you, Nancy. More, or do you want to come back later? Okay, Eric LAZARUS and then LYNN FEINERMAN. Eric, go ahead. Are you unmuted? This unmuting is really.
There I am. Okay, hi.
There you are. Hi.
So imagine that I'm out canvassing for candidates who clearly aren't supporters of Project 2025, and someone assures me that it's not as big a problem as I believe. What are some things I can say that are brief? And I'm certainly not going to tell them, go read 900 pages. Help me to be brief and useful.
It's really important, if you know the background of the person you're talking to, and you don't always know, But if you know what their key issue or two is, then you can tailor your talking points to that person. So, for example, if reproductive freedom for pregnant people who can be pregnant is their issue, then it's important to mention that Project 2025 calls for a national abortion ban. They will ban abortion on day one of the next conservative administration nationwide. It will not matter that blue states have tried to protect abortion. They will withhold federal funds from blue states that do not comply with this order to ban abortion nationwide. So there are those three things, but then you can also talk about how they're already doing that in red states. This is not some hyperbolic thing that you're imagining. 26 states have restricted or banned abortion in this country. So half the population that can be pregnant already lives in the world Project 2025 envisions for us. So it's not hyperbolic to tell someone this is real and this is happening in this country. So that little bit may be enough on reproductive freedom. I try on my Substack to give talking points for people when they talk. And I cover a different chunk of it every week, where 1 week I'll do the environment. This week I'm doing women's rights and suppressing women. So I try to give people talking points and specific things to say and scenarios about what they could do as part of what I give you, so that you can pull those things to the different people as you talk. I don't always know when I talk to someone what's going to move them.
Let's assume the issue this person cares about is democracy. Can you give me some nice points that someone who's not already very educated might resonate?
Well, it's interesting that Project 2025 and Republicans talk repeatedly about individual freedom and restoring Americans to be able to live in the blessings of liberty, which is another thing they've pulled out of the Bible. But Project 2025 calls for a dictator. It concentrates all the power of the federal government in the President of the United States, and the Supreme Court has already made that possible with their ruling right before the 4th of July. So Project 2025 completely transforms our government from a democracy into a dictatorship headed by the president, who would be a dictator. So there is no democracy anymore. We would resemble a little liberal democracy at best, like Turkey or like Hungary.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Lynn, Ruth, John Steiner, and then we want to go to Ohio, with home of J.D. Vance as well. So go ahead, Lynn, and then I'm looking for. I don't see Andrea Miller or Ray McClendon on, but when they come on, we'll let them have a shot too. Ruth, go ahead. Then John Steiner.
No, Lynn.
Oh, sorry, Lynn. Lynn,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Andrea. I
Hey.
put my email in the chat because I produce Women Rising Radio, and I've got some ideas about what we might do together. First thing I'd like to say is that behind all of the dramatic and ridiculous policies in the Project 2025 is a massive deregulation scheme, which includes the abolishing of the FDIC, which will mean that there is absolutely no regulation on what they can do with your money and my money.
And no guarantees of it.
Yeah, and that's the first thing. The second thing is a question, finally, and that is, I'm really concerned that Dominion Voting Systems is run by a Canadian company that was founded by Christian Dominionists. And I'm wondering if you have done any investigation on that. You know, the Rump sued Dominion, and I felt that was just a bunch of theater. and maybe it was even done to cover their you-know-whats while they do what they want. So I'm wondering if you have done any investigation into that, what your view is of the fact that we are basically supplied all our voting systems by Dominion.
I have not done any research in that, so I didn't even know that was the case. So that's horrifying.
Well, that's one of the reasons we advocate hand-marked, hand-counted, digitally scanned paper ballots, which Lori Grace has been a supporter of. She's on the call with us as well. And that's a big deal. Thank you for that. Now, Lynn, do you want to jump in real quickly? And with a follow-up, then we'll go to Ruth and John Steiner.
Yeah, I would just say I would love to talk with you, Andra, and I put my email in the chat. I will also try to get it to you, just on a private chat thing.
Yeah, I know the hosts have my email, but I'll look in the chat before I sign off too.
Yes, and Andrea, I don't know if I don't look at the chat during this, but if you put your contacts in the chat, I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to get in touch with you. Dr.
I'll put my
Ruth and then
there it
John
is right
Steiner, please. Thank you, Lynn. Dr. Ruth and John Steiner, please.
Andra, you are amazing. And just don't hire the Secret Service of the United States, but I hope you do have some kind of bodyguard. I am very serious about this. You need to be speaker at the Democratic convention, or you need, because you have amazing street cred, having come from your background. So anybody here who has any way of getting into, whether it's Harvey through Ray McClendon, up through Kamala Harris, whatever, you need to be a speaker. And actually you need to be interviewed several times on several stations with your message, because you've got the facts and you've got the background. And Harvey, just kudos to you for finding her. I don't know how you did.
Actually, Andrea, it's great to have you. And I got to tell you that Dr. Ruth grew up in Mobile, Alabama, so she knows where it's.
Well, she knows a lot of this background
Christian
too.
Nationalists, full disclosure.
But
Thank
you
you, Andrea, and thank you, Harvey.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. John Steiner and then Diana Artemis.
Andrea,
Then
thank
we'll
you.
go to Nancy Larson in Ohio.
Echoing what's been said about your journey and your courage, but I want to pick up on what Ruth said. Are you having a chance to get out there at the level that she's suggesting, whether it's to the convention or CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, or even Fox News if they debate with you? But seriously,
No, I have tried and tried and tried and cannot get any responses from any of those outlets.
so if any of us are able,
Rick Wilson is the only person at the Lincoln Project.
Yep.
Was the first person in that tier of people who agreed to interview me and send the elevator back down, and was impressed because I was the first person who was calling this a Christo-Fascist manifesto, where everybody else was just calling it this wonkish policy document. And I'll always be appreciative to him for that. It did expose me to more people, but it's very difficult to get responses from people at these higher tiers.
we
for me.
get it.
Well, to me, go ahead, John.
Harvey, just a sec. Do you
Yeah, please.
if we have access or potential access, do you have a little PR packet or something that you could give us that we could try to use to send to such people?
I could put something together, sure.
Please
And
do. And John is a great one to know.
And
Okay.
what's the, Harvey and Andra, what's the best way for those of us who at least want to make an attempt to get hold of that? Send
At
it
my
to
email
Harvey
address that I put in the chat, I
All
can
right,
send it to
we'll
anyone
send
who
you an
wants it.
email if we want to see what we can do to help you.
We'll
Okay, thank you, John.
We'll make sure you get connected, John. That'll be great.
Great.
What always blows my mind is that if the actual Jesus showed up at a MAGA rally and tried to
They'd arrest him
they'd arrest him. That's the least they do. Are you kidding me? I mean,
or kill him again.
yeah, they would. Absolutely. It's mind-boggling to me.
No, I
okay.
said to someone today that they don't worship Jesus. They worship the angry, vengeful Old Testament God, and they have incarnated him as a man in their candidate. So they worship their candidate.
Right. Well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, Jesus was a hippie of color, but what do we know?
Right.
Go ahead, Diane, Artemis, and then Mary. Well, I promised actually, and yeah, Mary, if you'll be quick, and then we'll go to Nancy Larson, give us a report from Ohio. Go ahead, Diane, Artemis.
Yeah, my concern is I try to get the word out using Facebook as well, and I belong to lots of groups for pro-democracy groups. And Facebook has new AI algorithms that only target Project 2025 postings and anti-Trump postings. They do not target postings of MAGA lies and Trump lies and violence, etc. And even Ruth Ben-Ghiat has noticed that all of her postings, Lucid, have been banned by Facebook. They shut down your account. Today, Andra, I thought your title of Project 2025, aka MAGA Mein Kampf, was brilliant. I worked on producing a flyer with a friend, posted it on Facebook. They've all been banned and pulled down. I shared with 12 groups and they've all been banned and pulled down there. I think I'm going to lose my Facebook account. Can we do anything? Of course, the legal system here sucks. It's controlled by oligarchs. Can we do anything for an antitrust lawsuit? Suggestions, please.
One of the vice presidents at Facebook worked on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court.
Oh my God.
So it's no surprise to me that they are taking this kind of stance. Whether we could file a class action lawsuit or not, or some sort of anti-competitive lawsuit, censorship lawsuit, that's a question for an attorney, and I'm not an attorney. So I do know that I have gained some traction on Instagram. I don't use Facebook. I create memes on my Substack now every day for my readers to post on social media. I use the term Project 2025, and when I post something from Project 2025, I reference a page number. When I post a statistic, I reference where that statistic came from as a source. And so far, I've not had anything pulled down of mine or anyone tell me that they couldn't share it. People have tried to share links to my Substack, like with Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I know Ruth, and she's delightful. And, you know, they don't want you going off of Facebook to check anything. So they're limiting links to Substack or anywhere because they want to keep you there on Facebook. So I have created little memes. You can find them in my posts. I started this last week. And then I've been making 1-minute reels on Instagram to summarize. And
Great.
none of those have been censored. So whether they work on Facebook, no one's told me that they've been censored on Facebook. So
Well, good for
that's
you.
been my approach.
Good for you. Good for you. We have 72 people with us. Mary, and then we're going to go straight to Nancy Larson from Ohio. Mary Stonewall Butler. Where'd you go?
Yeah, Nancy has to leave in about
Oh,
12
all right.
minutes, let's
Go
get
ahead.
her on.
Nancy was first anyway. Go ahead, Nancy. You're unmuted. Give us the report from Ohio. And tonight you're going to have dinner with JD Vance. So let's get that covered.
Make him pick up the check.
Okay. We've had a couple victories here. Last year, we struck down the ballot initiative thing they were trying to pass in a special election in August, where they would have changed the threshold to 60% in order to pass. And we said, no, how with that? So that went away. November, we put women's reproductive rights on the ballot, and we passed that 57%. Which they knew we would probably get 57, 58%. That's where they were trying to raise the threshold ahead of that vote to 60. So both of those were democracy wins. We submitted 730,000 signatures to put on the ballot in November, anti-gerrymandering. And it's what Michigan did with a citizen-led redistricting commission so that they are able to have a panel, 15 citizens, 5 Rs, 5 Ds, 5 independents, who would be drawing the districts, and that is going to pass also. So finally, Ohio, if we get that in there, we will have fair districts. They are pulling out all the stops to try to keep that from happening, though, and they're doing a lot of voter suppression. Since the last decade or so, they have purged 2 million voters from the voter rolls. And just today, there was supposed to be another purge of 160,000 voters. So I 100% underline what Andra was saying, that we are living 2025 already in Ohio and have been for several, maybe the last decade. And the voter suppression is ridiculous. The reasons that they are giving for this are that there's some kind of mismatch between DMV records, Social Security, and the voter registration. But 2 laws, the federal government, when somebody changes their address with the DMV, it is supposed to be automatically changed. The Brennan Center wrote to LaRose, who is our Secretary of State, pointed out that federal law requires the state to automatically update a voter's registration record when they report a change. It's not up to the voters to make sure that they do that. That's supposed to be an automatic process. So basically, Ohio is not complying with that federal law and is kicking people out when they don't also take the responsibility for filing a new voter registration. We also have state law that is being ignored. When somebody files a national change of address form, that those folks are ending up on this voter purge. That is not supposed to happen, because if they're moving from county to county or within the same county, Ohio is putting them on a voter purge list saying that they moved and therefore they don't live here anymore, even when they might have just moved across the street in the same county. So it's just so lawless. It's absolutely ridiculous. The League of Women Voters and some other advocacy groups, when they looked into, we get a hold of the purge lists, we start calling people, find out what's going on, sending out our own postcards. We found a 20% error rate in the last purge that happened. That 20% of those people were not dead. They hadn't moved out of state. It was totally not appropriate for them to have been on that purge list. And that's the level of error. So you have 2 million voters that have been purged. 20% of those, I mean, it's absolutely enough to be throwing elections here. And just commenting on J.D. Vance, the reason he was picked is that he came straight out and said, I would have done what you wanted Pence to do. And that was the loyalty test that he passed. That's why he's there. He very underperformed in his election. DeWine, our governor, won by 25 points. Vance won by 6 points. So he was not a very popular candidate and was only saved by Peter Thiel coming in and dumping millions and millions of dollars into the election. What he brings to the table for Trump is an assurance that he will do whatever's illegal, whatever needs to be done, unlike Pence, who held that line.
Wow. And of course, you know, you're talking about voter suppression and purging. It's going on all over the country. Wendy has reported to us from Florida, and it's happening in Georgia. I mean, this is how they're going to, if they're going to win this election, it's going to be with voter purging. And in Ohio, of course, yeah. We have won 2 anti-gerrymandering referenda, and the legislature has simply refused to do what the public voted to do. Right. You know, I mean, it's beyond outrageous. So there you go. Steve
the
Caruso,
Republican Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, who sided with the Dems, over those 5 contested maps that we are using, even though they're unconstitutional. She was the person that spearheaded this campaign called Citizens Not Politicians, meaning put the citizens in charge, get the politicians out of the business of drawing maps. And she has been making a lot of trips around Ohio to stand up for that. We need a big push to try to get a Dem-controlled Ohio Supreme Court, because I think they'll do in reverse what they did last time. The bipartisan majority kicked out those maps saying that they were unconstitutional. They ignored it. I think when we have a redistricting commission that gives them constitutional maps, they will be challenged, and a Republican controlled Ohio Supreme Court will throw those out and send them back and say, we don't like them. You know, whether they literally are constitutional. It's just, you have to fight on every single.
Right. Well, let's go to Steve Caruso, who's also in Ohio, and then we'll go to Mary, Ruth, and Wendy. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Ohio opted out of the National Voter Database. That was a thing not too long ago, a year ago or less than a year ago. And also J.D. Vance's wife clerked for Kavanaugh and Roberts. So there's, they're grabbing at everything they can grab at. It's like the Russians doing cybersecurity stuff and hacking people. It's not beyond the Republicans. They're going to do that. They're going to hack. And this is the thing with Vance. Buttigieg was kind of in on that in the Iowa elections. I don't know if you remember, where they went and had the special app that everybody was going to vote on, And so there's this whole cadre of militaristic cyber thing going on in the background. You got Peter Thiel, you got Facebook blocking the 2025 thing. It's cyber war, and it's better than a physical, violent killing war, but this is happening.
Yes, it is, very much so. Mary Butler, go ahead. Thank you for that, Steve. And then we'll go after this, we'll get some more questions, and then we'll go to Lori Grace to talk to us about Agenda 47. Mary Butler, go ahead. I don't see you anymore. Where are you? Mary Butler, are you with us?
Go ahead, Ruth.
Ruth, go ahead. Then Wendy, then John again.
Yeah,
Then we go to Lori Grace.
I'm not smoking anything, but where's
not?
Merrick Garland on all of this? I mean, he's the Attorney
He's smoking
General.
something. He's the one who's smoking.
This is a national issue. And it seems like some enforcement is in order. And, I may be way off base, but that seems like something maybe an Attorney General ought to be involved with.
Yeah, if we had one.
Depressing update.
You're 100% right about that, Ruth. I mean, I don't know what Merrick Garland's story is. It's outrageous. Wendy, very quickly, then John Steiner, and then we'll go to Lori Grace, followed by Dr. Nancy, who's going to put Trump on the couch. Well, we better not do that, Nancy. But anyway, all right, go ahead, Wendy, please.
Just make sure he stays on the couch sleeping for like 4 years.
Okay.
Thanks. So, yeah, Florida and Ohio are sister states, is what I've been saying for a while. Same thing with the gerrymandered maps. Like, we're actually still using the DeSantis maps that like nobody stood up against, and so we're a bright red state, and really we're really not. The thing with the DMV that happened here a few years ago, and I've worked professionally on petition campaigns, one for abortion and another for the right to clean water, and collecting the petitions. You have people that I'll speak to, and I know that they're hip and they seem like responsible civil people, and then they're not valid with their voter registration. And we're also in the middle of like an eviction, homelessness pandemic, and so people didn't change their address with the DMV, and they got purged, and they don't even know it. And this has been going on here for like well over a year. So and now they're also the third-party organizations that do voter registration can be fined up to $50,000 if they don't follow some like mystical protocol that has now been invented by these magical unicorns or whatever. but a ton of people in Florida. It's really, really insane what's happening here. But I just want to concur and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Wendy. And Wendy's been on the grassroots, on the ground floor of all this stuff. But the voter purging, which got us going in Ohio 2004, and was really at the root of George W. Bush's victory in Florida 2000. That's the big issue now. It's really going on brutally. John Steiner and then Mary. I think you're back with us, Mary. I'll try and unmute you. John, you're okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nancy, thank you. I'll give my Ohio bona fides. I was born in Cleveland. I grew up in Cincinnati, so obviously still very connected. Where are you based? What organization are you working with? How much is the Sherrod Brown campaign on to all that you're talking about?
I ran for office and I've just been involved ever since I did not win. There's a couple activist groups here. I'm in League of Women Voters and Persisters. We have folks that have been calling those people on the purge list to let them know, to get them re-registered. Sherrod Brown has been struggling. His stance with I don't want to get into that. That's a whole nother side thing. I don't know what he would do with this. He is in a tough race against Bernie Moreno, and he's making some stances that I don't see him in the same light as I did before. He's selling out in some respects, and I'm not happy about that. Certainly, I hope he wins, but he's making some compromises I don't like.
Okay, thank you. John, anything else? John Steiner?
Nancy, I'll reach out to you in chat.
Okay.
Please do, yeah. Mary Stonewall and Mary Butler Stonewall, real quick. Mary, go ahead.
All right. I like what everybody's saying today. I feel like I'm taking a deep breath after this weekend when it comes to who's running stuff. But no, I just wanted to say to everybody here, everybody's in different states and everything, that come this new election for local or otherwise, that please know that I'm here as a public servant for any community, especially impoverished communities in the United States. And during this election, if there's anything I can do to assist other than financial, because I'm poor, research-wise, homeless issues, I'm a contingency expert. So
Okay.
I'm here for everybody. You guys can find me. I'm the only Mary K. Butler Stonewall on Facebook. Okay, guys?
Thank you, Mary.
Please reach out to me. I'm just saying I'm here for you. That's all.
Well, we're here for you too. So good to hear from you. And I want to go now to Lori Grace. Lori, you have been involved. I know that we've got Andra here who really knows, Project 2025. You've also called to my attention the 47. Can you tell us about that, please?
Well, Agenda 47, and I did bring it to you about Project 2025 also.
Yes, yes.
But I want to bring forward the issue of violence.
Yes.
Violence around the election. I guarantee that we will have more of what happened on January 6th, not necessarily in Washington. I hope that President Biden will assemble the National Guard there. But first of all, Trump is planning to challenge the election. He said it. If he apparently loses. So the way he's going to challenge it is he's going to use violence. And now the Christian nationalists, which have become very important, consider him anointed by God. In the Republican convention, over and over again, different delegates said he's anointed by God. God saved him, this kind of thing. Of course, I find that very dangerous to consider that somebody is, that the whole huge group of people believe that Trump is anointed by God and that they are God's foot soldiers to get Trump in, okay? So they're willing to go to any level. I've also double checked Trump talking about the bloodbath, which he tried, if he loses, I looked at it. They were trying to back it out. He had been talking about electric cars, but he uses the word bloodbath, all right? And then additionally, the people that were very effective in the area of violence were veterans in 2020, okay, that had enlisted into the Proud Boys and the Code Observers, okay? And so additionally, what I did when I studied after a while, I moved away from Project 25 to Agenda 47. It's much worse, okay? And because he is developing a militia, and we already have one militia that showed itself in Nassau County, New York State, believe it or not, with 75 gun-owning self-described militia people. What I found when I went to Agenda 47 is that Trump is using Agenda 47 to recruit, actually subtly, but a little bit behind the scenes, more people for his militias, okay? And the way he's doing it with these veterans is telling them how terrible veterans have had it around here. And yes, I agree, they have. I don't think our country has treated our veterans well. And what he's going to do, which, you know, he's going to take all of the the illegal immigrants, for instance, that are still living in New York, take them out of, this is if he wins, or, you know, he's going to be busy disputing if he wins first with violence. And I'm hoping that the Democrats are going to get really serious about protecting the situation. But he's getting ready to give the veterans, and on one level, I don't think it's a bad idea to take out the immigrants and put in the veterans who he says are homeless and have no money and are shivering in the cold. And I do agree that veterans are not treated well in our country, but they have made an oath to protect the Constitution, and they believe that serving Trump is the same, and they are defending the country. But when I looked at Agenda 47, I could see right off where they're enrolling veterans subtly with gifts, okay? And where we have secret militia being planned in different places. One of them is in Arizona. Another one is in Nassau, New York, which was strange because it's Democratic state, you know, state and county. But expect blood, okay? And expect blood. I mean, while Biden is still president, he should be alerted about expecting blood and challenge. And I don't know what it takes to get him to call up the National Guard, but I'd like to see that happen.
Well, we may see the National Guard on January, whenever, you know, if Harris actually wins. And Lori, thank you much, and stay with us, please. We're going to go to Roy McClendon, who's in Georgia. Who Georgia, of course, is no stranger to violence in elections. And Ray, you're on vacation. We want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We've talked a lot about voter suppression, and now Lori has brought in the issue of violence, and we've talked about Project 2025 and Agenda 47. Tell us what's going on in Georgia.
Well, what's going on in Georgia, as is going on around the country, there have been a series of meetings, Zoom calls, et cetera, that have occurred over the last 24 hours, where people are unifying around the new candidate, Kamala Harris. There's a unified front. People are energized and enthusiastic. There were 44,000 Black women on a call last night. We are putting together another call tonight for Black men to do something similar. A lot of money was raised last night. We intend to raise money tonight. So the focus is on unity, on going out on the attack against Project 2025 and MAGA overall, and having a united front going over the next several weeks. We expect that there's going to be continued coalescing around Harris, but the energy is very high right now, very strong, even in the face of what we know is going to be a substantial battle as they see the strength that's there. There's already talk about civil war, already talk about a smear campaign, birtherism 2.0, but those things will not deter the energy that we've already felt in the different conference calls and Zooms.
Well, we know that Georgia is a hotbed or a center of massive voter purges, but you also managed to get a Black guy and a Jewish guy elected to the U.S. Senate.
Yes.
So what are you anticipating is the big focal point in Georgia coming into the election? Are you putting people in the grassroots? How are you going to be protecting people's right to vote?
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be doing what we did in 2020, where we galvanized the Black and brown vote in order to not only get Biden over the finish line, but also, as you know, those two Senate runoffs where we returned 95% of the Black voters to the polls for the runoff that voted in the general election. And as many of you know, you were lucky to get 50% return turnout for a runoff election. So to get 95% was an extraordinary feat. I see the same kind of energy building now for this new top of the ticket. I expect that that's going to be even stronger than it was in 2020. The bigger hurdle that we didn't have in 2020 was that we know that we have now a stronger, more burrowed in MAGA response to local election officials to influence and harass local election boards to actually put forth more legal challenges, more voter purges. So we've got to have boots on the ground, not just in terms of grassroots energizing voters to get the vote out, but also election protection at the local election board level. So having poll monitors, poll watchers, people attending local election boards is going to be crucial over the next 90 days.
Yeah, they're in Georgia as well, and other states rather, like Ohio, as Nancy Larson has pointed out, the protecting of the vote and the voter turnout. And are you facing, Ray, in Georgia, the same kinds of voter roll purges that are happening in Florida and Ohio?
Yes. Georgia is one of the leading states on voter purges. There's a group of MAGA vigilantes, as we call them, that a small group of a little over a dozen people actually challenged over 200,000 voters in Georgia over the course of the last couple of years. We expect that to increase now as we get closer to the election. We also know that excuse me, not only are they challenging, but they also, with the new SB 189 that passed, they can be closer to the actual precinct workers. So the potential for intimidation of poll workers and other election officials has gone up. So we've got to be diligent, not only on the grassroots get out the vote level, but on protecting the integrity of the elections and be able to thwart the MAGA onslaught that we expect when they are losing. They're going to come and challenged with false allegations of voter fraud, and we've got to have people there to refute that.
Wow, that's nitty gritty, boy. That's really
Yep.
where we're at in this election. Mike Hirsch wants to talk to you, Ray. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Hey, Mike.
Ray, thank you so much. You're a true friend of the show for coming in on your vacation. We really appreciate that. You
Sure.
work really hard, and we know that you earn every minute of vacation time. I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel about people coalescing around Kamala Harris? And every Zoom I'm on, everybody wants to pick somebody else besides her, or pick her running mate, or do something like that. But what I'm feeling around the country is the last person standing who might have challenged her was Gavin Newsom, where Nancy Pelosi was kind of holding out a little bit for a minute, but now she's endorsed. Everybody else seems to be getting behind the VP. What's your take on that?
I agree. That ship has sailed now. That's what I was nervous about and worried about. That's the only thing that could throw this into chaos, would be not to coalesce around Harris. So the strong leadership that President Biden showed by immediately giving her a full-throated endorsement, then followed by President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, several others, several state delegation chairs, all of those that came in very quickly, I think galvanized support around her, and let it be known that we're not going to go into some kind of chaotic brokered convention. That would have just been chaos and would have spelled absolute disaster and loss in November. So,
Right.
So by the end of the night, I felt a lot better. Plus, what this really does is it galvanizes and re-energizes the strongest base in the Democratic Party, which are Black women, and so that's going to make a huge difference going forward. Somebody just gave me a thumbs up coming to dinner. A white,
well, I just got a text from somebody. Thank you, Ray. Just got a text from somebody saying that, apropos to Project 2025, that God created Donald Trump to lose to a Black woman. So there we go.
That's poetic justice and at the highest level, no question about it. But let me just say that this is an opportunity to unite, to get away from all of the bickering that's gone on over the last 3 weeks, and I see it coalescing, and to try to turn back, Manchin or anybody else, or Newsom's already come out in support. Whitmer has, Shapiro has. So anybody that could have been a serious candidate has essentially already come out for her. And therefore, I think the best thing to do is let's unite and know what the real challenge is.
Well, if I was a betting man, I'd go to Las Vegas and put my money for the VP on Roy Cooper, who's nobody has heard of before, but he's the governor of North Carolina, and he's on his way out. He's term limited. I've seen a clip of him. He looks like a very funny, personable guy. He's a good-looking white guy with a Southern accent. Does that help you all in Georgia?
It possibly could, but the biggest thing that's going to help us in Georgia is for people to unite behind Harris right now. That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to help with our core base. Remember, it's over 30% of the registered voters in Georgia are Black, and Black women come out in the highest numbers. That's going to turn them out. We also see a lot of progressive white women that are now coming out recognizing that this is an historic opportunity. So I think she's going to make a good decision on whoever comes in as the VP on the ticket. The biggest thing right now is let's get unified and get her over the top in terms of the number of delegates necessary to make it absolutely clear that we're going to be united going into the convention.
Right. Well, I don't think she's going to be nominating Marco Rubio, but
And
You
now
never
that's
know,
not going
right?
to happen. And they're not going to do some of the stupid stuff I've heard about. Nominate a Republican male.
Yeah, no,
That's it's the
only
dumbest thing I've ever heard.
only a Republican would suggest that,
Yeah,
unless it's
right.
Abraham Lincoln. He'd be
right. Exactly.
Okay, Lynn,
Okay.
go ahead real quick, and then we'll go to.
Yeah, I
Hey,
might
thank you,
question.
thank you, Ray, for joining
Yeah.
us. Go enjoy your vacation.
Does she have a question? I'll take one question if she has.
Yeah, I do
Go
have a
ahead.
question, Ray,
And then
for
we have
you
Dennis.
and for everybody else. What about Beto O'Rourke? He can do the border thing, chew up the rump and dance. He's got 40 electoral college votes.
Texas. The only problem is I don't think Texas is ready yet. My money would be more on someone who can tip us over in a battleground state. I don't really see Texas as a battleground state yet. So that would be my only concern about Beto. He's a great guy. I love him. But in terms of the states, I'd be looking at Arizona, Pennsylvania, something of that nature, where that candidate, Kelly in Arizona or Shapiro in Pennsylvania, or as was just mentioned, Sluggo just mentioned, Cooper in North Carolina. We've got to deliver one or more of those battleground states in order to get to 270.
Well, people never seem to notice that North Carolina actually has one more electoral vote than Michigan. And you've got this is an 8-state election. You've got 3 blocks. You got Arizona and Nevada, which actually is not that big, but it's significant. And then you've got Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which we all know about. And then there's Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia. And I don't know what her real chances are in Georgia, but Virginia, and if she nominates Cooper in North Carolina, they're definitely within reach.
Well,
And
they
that's
just
the
went
whole
up in
election.
Georgia. They just went up in Georgia. So although Biden was trailing, they just went up in Georgia. So we're going to keep hope alive here.
All right. Very good.
All right.
Thank you too
Take
much,
care.
Ray. Enjoy
All right,
yourself.
take care.
Thanks for
All
joining
right.
us. Thank
All
you,
right.
Lynn, for that. Let's go to Dennis Bernstein. Then we can go to Nancy Niparko to put Trump on the couch. And she's going to be joined by Stormy Daniels, who will get a real response from Donald. But anyway, go ahead, Dennis Bernstein.
I was
Dennis?
just wondering, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Good. I was just wondering, I would have liked to hear it from Ray, but I was wondering, you've got the Speaker of the House threatening some kind of legal action. Is there any, given that they own the Supreme Court, is there a way to take legal action because the Democrats changed their candidate? And
There's
this
a
is
rumbling about that.
unprecedented. What's that?
There's rumbling about that, but the response that I've read is that the Democrats never formally nominated Biden. He's not been the formal nominee. They've not had a convention. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. It's a big question. I certainly want to know if they're going to be able to tie it up in one way or another using, as they have so effectively, the Supreme Court, which is obviously now the power in the national U.S. government.
That's a good question. At this point in time, I mean, their actual convention is not for another month. So,
Right.
I do want to write, as someone who got beat up at the 1968 Chicago convention with Lissa, who's on the call with me. And Lissa, I want to co-write a piece about you and me getting whacked at the corner of Balboa in Michigan. But I want to urge the mayor of Chicago, and you're hearing this here first, to not do what Dick Daley did in 1968. I mean, we're going to anticipate a fair and a healthy protest in the streets of Chicago if the war in Gaza is still going. And, I'm going to tell you right now, if Dick Daley had given us permits to march, to which we were constitutionally entitled, and given us the right to camp in Grant Park and Lincoln Park, there would never have been the riots that happened in Chicago, They were totally caused by Dick Daley, and Richard Nixon would not have been president. And the war of Vietnam might have ended 7 years earlier. So I want to send an open letter to the mayor of Chicago saying, look, if demonstrators show up, give them the permits, for God's sakes, and let them camp in Grant Park and Lincoln Park and turn it into a party. So, you know, Alyssa was on the call earlier. She and I were together in Chicago, and that's what I'm going to urge for the mayor of Chicago, whoever it may be. I don't know who the mayor of Chicago is, but it's certainly not Dick Daley anymore. Thank God. All right, Dennis, did you want to add anything else? Dennis Bernstein, you still with us, bro? And Wendy, I
I'm
hope you're
good.
feeling better.
I'm good. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Wendy, you said you were having vertigo. We're hoping you're okay. Okay. It's just from being in Florida. Everybody in Florida has vertigo. Okay. We want to go to Dr. Nancy now. It's not as pronounced. I think ANDRA WATKINS, are you still with us? We wanted to thank you. And Nancy Larson, if you're still with us.
I am
thank
still here. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're now going to get a psychoanalysis from a trained professional, a neurologist, Dr. Nancy Niparko. We have had a situation, Andra, thanks for staying with us. We have had a situation where an elderly gentleman who appeared to be struggling, certainly to be president of the United States, didn't seem to have the capacity anymore. He's been moved out. Now we have a slightly younger guy, like 3 years younger, or 2 years younger, who is also clearly mentally challenged. Dr. Niparko, what do you want to say about that?
First, I want to say that if we all read a transcript of the Biden-Trump debate, I think we wouldn't be hearing so many criticisms that it was a disaster for Biden. I think he was coherent, but it was really his physical disability that set the alarms for everybody. He has a lifelong stutter, and I think it's going to be admitted soon. He's in the early stages of Parkinson's, but you can have Parkinsonism without having Parkinson's disease. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're demented. I looked up the statistics. It's really only about 50%. And it wouldn't be in the early stages anyway. So the criticisms of Biden, I will hold to our physical handicaps and not mental or cognitive or emotional. And I am dismayed that Americans with disabilities haven't been up in arms since that debate. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has always shown some disabilities. And I am a medical doctor. And if you're a medical doctor, if you're a real scientist, you always feel like you need science and numbers behind you to prove whatever you say. And I think the first and greatest example I'm going to review for you was a book put out in 2017 by 27 psychiatrists who attended a Yale conference called Duty to Warn, and published a book called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. And just reading the titles of the chapters in this book tell you what the points that they made. Hedonism, narcissism, self-sabotage rooted in the art of the deal in his past, trust deficit, sociopathy, cognitive impairment, dementia, alleged incapacitated pension, electoral college, the 25th Amendment. And the man who wrote the foreword, Robert Lifton, who's an MD, studied in 1962 Hiroshima. And Harvey, you'll like this. He studied the psychiatric and the body experience of the nuclear bomb and summed it up with one plane, one bomb, one city. And the foreword went into discussing the term malignant normality. And I think that's at the core of what we're dealing with Trump. He the society adapts to this this changing norm. It happened with the people working with the Nazis who were convinced that it was okay to do the murdering they did. And it also happened with the US CIA torture protocol, which slowly was changed by indoctrination. And Trump has created his own reality as the president. He, through the democratic process, politically and ethically normal is what he's put out. And by the way, Fred Trump, his father, in 1991, when he was 86 years old, was diagnosed to have senile dementia. How old is Trump?
78.
Okay. So he's not
Same
86.
IQ. So I can't resist this. I actually, the one of the most interesting movies I've ever seen about the mindset in Japan after Hiroshima, in Hiroshima actually, is a movie called, you're not going to believe this, Godzilla Plus One. And it's on Netflix. And it's actually really good. It has a very interesting and sane and attractive portrayal of people living in Hiroshima after the bombing. And of course, Godzilla shows up and all that stuff. But nonetheless, it's actually, Nancy, you would be interested in it. Godzilla Plus One. I never thought I'd recommend a movie like that to anybody, but it's pretty amazing. Well, so
let me move on. I have a few more
go
minutes.
ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Okay. With inserting my own experience, I have to tell you, when I first started hearing Trump talk, I thought he acts and speaks like my 2- and 3-year-olds. Remember that a 2-year-old says no, no all the time, and their whole world is revolved around him. And I don't care how much people say about the poor guy's mother abandoned him, etc., and so forth. The fact is, he really believes the world revolves around him like a 3-year-old, and he speaks like a 9-year-old, calling people's names. And one of the most fascinating interviews that I've heard was a linguist from Colombia called John McWader. And he described Trump's speech as unadorned. People before there was written language used to speak like this. He speaks as if he's not learned to write or read. And all this, these best schools that he brags of, he never learned to speak professionally. And one specific thing is what you do when you're not educated and you're trying to impress people, you add tags to your sentences. You add, believe me, you know, people don't know, which really is code for saying, I just learned this. Anyway, he's oddly adolescent, and he's got a narcotic joy in dismissing other people and belittling everyone else. He ignores the truth, and he's a compulsive liar, and he feels, I think he lies so much, like a couple other people I've met in my life, he feels that he can't tell the difference between truth and what serves him right, and truth to him, that's the same. Enough.
Oh my God. Terrifying. ANDRA WATKINS, let's put this in larger perspective if you want to join in with Dr. Nancy. Dr. Nancy is a great human being and a really fabulous doctor who has been a part of the cause for a long, long time. Myra Reason points out, by the way, the title of that movie is Godzilla -1. And I am actually serious. I was kind of impressed with that movie. Andra, what do you think about what Nancy just said about Trump fits into the 2025 narrative?
Well, obviously, it's tailored to someone who would be this kind of narcissistic, psychopathic, disordered person. I gave an example on Substack last week, a personal example. My mother is a covert narcissist, so I grew up with a narcissist mother in a Christian nationalist environment. So I was gaslit everywhere, home, church, school. And so watching outtakes from the debate, I couldn't watch the debate. I can't listen to him talk. But I did go after people talked about it and watched outtakes. And what was so shocking to me was how Joe Biden, Jake Tapper, and Dana Bash's faces all look like my face would look when I would have one of these narcissistic confrontations with my mother. And I would look in the mirror and it's just this face. And if you've
it's
never
like the quote from John McEnroe, the great American philosopher John McEnroe, who used to yell, "You can't be serious, you must be kidding," whenever he got a call he didn't like. So that is that.
And
Does
so
that describe what you're saying?
I felt like it was just this psychological cage match of abuse on national television that people witnessed. And if you've never been through something like that, it's hard to imagine how people can't respond. But when when my mother would corner me and say these horrible things to me, you just can't respond. It's very debilitating to be put in those kinds of positions. So
that would explain Eric and Donald Jr., I guess. Ivanka seems to have come out of it somewhat, but very interesting. Barbara Winsett, you have not spoken. Let me see if I can get you unmuted. Nancy, this is great. Andra, so great you're staying with me. Barbara Winsett, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, disentangling the various issues, I think it's time to have an age limit to when people can run for office. Not everybody's going to be, just probability wise, that as we age, the probability of something going wrong is greater. So that, let's just have a decent age limit, and then we won't have to worry quite as much about some of these issues.
What would you put it at? What would it be?
Maybe 80.
Nancy Niparko, you're in the field. What do you think? Should there be an age limit, or what should it be?
Before an age limit, before a test for your Christianity, I think there should be a high school level finals exam on government to be able to be president. And I would do that first. To me, if you can't pass a test on government, you don't deserve to be president. But there are some older, very wise people, and that's what bothered me about the debate. I think Biden is a very wise person. I don't agree with him on everything, but he was entirely coherent if you saw his text written out.
Well, I think your test on government certainly would have eliminated George W. Bush. His father would have passed with flying colors, but Reagan
and Trump.
and
Trump.
Yeah.
So
Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's not just about one person or how they function, but in general, like the probabilities of, even if you are okay when you get elected, 3 years down the pike, you may not be. And the probabilities go up as you age. And that's what we have to look at. Why have these arguments over and over when, in fact, we could reduce the problem? Then, we could reduce it if we just, have a sensible age limit, like 80 or something.
All right, very interesting. Michael Tabor, I know you're in the wings. We're going to get to you shortly for your great discussion. We're looking forward to it. Tatanka Bricka, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Andra for being on the show and for focusing us on the people behind the personality of Donald Trump, the people that she deems most dangerous, the ones that are actually going to implement all this, starting with J.D. Vance. I'm really appreciative of that. I've been struggling myself with the the normalization of insanity. I mean, when you create an entire cult based on untruth, fantasy, it tends to it's toxic to us all. It's so I really want to focus on what you brought up, and I want to thank you for that, Andra. And there may be people who didn't even hear what you said on this call because they've come in later. And I'd like to give you an opportunity, because I don't know how long you're going to be on, an opportunity to restate that for yourself.
Yeah,
Andra?
I said earlier, and so if you're new, welcome, that I don't like to focus on Trump. I don't use his name. I call him 45 everywhere. I've had to explain to all my European friends here why I call him 45. So they've gotten a little bit of American civics as well. But I think he is a tool for the people behind him. I think he's useful. These Christian nationalists who want to turn America into a theocracy see him as being a useful tool that they can flatter and give things that he wants so that they can take over the government and turn it into a theocracy. He won't be around very long if he manages to hold power, but the people behind him will hold power for a long time. And that's what Project 2025 is designed to do. It's not some transformation that we will vote out in 2026 or 2028. It is a radical, total transformation of our government and our country and our society. And it will take us decades to undo that.
When I hear you talk about it, it's almost like the seriousness of calling it the systematic final solution for us all.
Mm-hmm.
Where, Andra, do you think Putin fits into this?
Well, I think he has a super PAC and he's funded a bunch of money, dark money. I think a number of people in the Republican Party and the Republican establishment are compromised by him. I'm not going to say that they're spies necessarily, but I think he probably has compromise on a lot of them. And so he keeps people in line that way. They're definitely using social media and the internet to sow as much disinformation and misinformation as they can. So this is, I mean, we are at war, whether we want to admit that or not. It's not a war like World War II where we're dropping bombs. It is an information war that we are in and that Russia is waging, and Iran and China. But Putin has a specific interest.
Well, you know, of course, since you studied this about Donald Trump's background with organized crime, and one of the major theories is that when the Soviet Union fell, all these mobsters made billions of dollars. They just looted the place, and then and they laundered it through Trump. The great guy on this is I can't his name right, Johnston. They wanted their rubles into the Western economy, and so they went to Trump, a bankrupt guy with real estate, and overpaid for everything and laundered the money through Trump. And then when Putin took control on the last day of 1999, all these mobsters, he was Don Corleone, and he basically owned Trump through the mob debts. And at the same time, he's exactly the kind of guy that you would think that Donald would bow down for, a strong man. But do they ever talk about Putin in the 2025 documents?
Project 2025 paints China, and they say communist China constantly. They call it that constantly as our biggest enemy. They mention Russia, they mention Iran, they mention North Korea. I think this was published either right before or right after Russia invaded Ukraine. So it was published in early 2022, so I don't know that the war was happening by that point. But they focus 90% of their energy on China, and Russia really doesn't have a big role as an enemy to play.
Right. Well, you know, the Christian right has always talked about losing China, as if China was by rights a Christian country, but you know, somehow the liberals let China go. That's a big part of the late 1940s, and I think they still feel that way. But you know, China is secular, and their civil service is based on merit, which is what the Republicans now are trying to get rid of, the MAGA people. By the way, if you're looking for some way to call Trump, you might try Voldemort. That worked for me. So, Barbara Wimsatt, you want to go ahead again? And anybody else want to raise your hand? We're going to wrap this up and go to Paul Tabor and Mike Tabor and talk about raising food, which will be good, and hopefully marijuana as well. Michael, you have to expand your horizons, but we can talk about that. Barbara Wimsatt, anybody else want to speak? Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'm awfully sorry to jump in again, but it really disturbs me when on this show you hear people blaming Russia for the war in Ukraine when it was obvious that we started the war in Ukraine.
No,
and
Russia invaded, but we caused it.
yeah, I mean, we led them to it by our interventions and NATO expansion and a number of other things. And I think it's unfortunate if people on this show don't know that.
Well, there you go. That's a strongly held opinion, no doubt about it. We haven't gone there. We also there's certain things we generally try to avoid. We focus on elections and stuff, but it's a good thing to discuss. Andra, we're gonna shift gears seriously now we still have 64 people with us. Andra, we hope you'll join us again. And one thing you have to understand about these calls is that unlike the rest of the United States, people on these calls have an amazing attention span. We've been going, you know, an hour and a half here, 90 minutes. We still have 64 people with us. The max we had was 74. So here we are. You're a great presenter.
Well, I loved being here, and I loved meeting all of you, and thanks for having me, and I'd love to come back.
You're a great presenter. And I've
you.
never met anybody who grew up, you know, the way you did. I probably have met many people who did.
They don't talk about it.
No one wants to talk about it. It must be, I'm sure you've got many years of therapy, either that or a really good marriage. So please do join us again. Nancy Niparko, it's always great to hear your analysis. Do you want to add anything also before we move along?
No, I'm fine now.
Okay, well, you're only billing us for 50 minutes, so that's okay.
Well, another time, I'm happy to talk about the actual brain differences on cerebral imaging that they find between Democrats and Republicans. But because I'm most of a developmental person, I take that with a grain of salt, because I think the more you practice a certain thing, that part of the brain grows bigger. And so it's either a cause or an effect. I think it's more of an effect, but people use it as evidence of the differences.
Are you saying that if you were presented with 100 brain scans, you could pick which ones were Democrats and which ones were Republican with a fair accuracy?
I don't know. It's been published.
Oh, okay.
Let's put it that way. Yes, it's been published.
How about the obvious one, people who've taken psychedelics and people haven't? Can you tell on a brain scan the difference?
I'd have to research that. I'm sure it's true.
All right. Well, get back to us on that one. That would be very interesting.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right. So listen, everybody, we're going to switch gears now. And thankfully, we're going to go out into the garden and we're going to talk to Michael Tabor, who's an expert on food and food raising and organics. Tell me if I'm wrong, Michael. And Michael Hirsch has brought you on, speaks highly of you. So let's rock it. What does your hat say? Bard's Auto Sales. Okay. Does that mean, are you saying it's Are you saying that Shakespeare ran a used car lot? Is that what you're trying to tell us? Go ahead.
I don't know. I really don't know how much of what I'm going to say is relevant to any of you. I'm in the world of growing food, raising
It's all
food.
relevant. Yeah, just tell us what you're about. I lived on an organic farm for many years and would again in a heartbeat. So go for it.
We actually have stopped using the term organic farming. It implies wealth, and it implies people who could afford more expensive food. And since we do a lot of outreach to middle income and low income people, organic is a turnoff. So we just say pesticide free or chemical free. And I just don't think my suggestion, that is a proposal for a rural farm service corps, is relevant to this group. This group is
absolutely. Go ahead, knock yourself out. You're here for a reason.
But
after an hour and a half of electoral politics, we need to switch gears. So go for it.
Okay, well, the only thing I just don't see my proposal being relevant. But what I will say is this: as a progressive, as a person definitely on the left, I was very active in STS in my youth, and Congress of Racial Equality, working in the South, all that kind of stuff. I, living at least most of the time on a farm 100 miles away from Washington in South Central Pennsylvania, the one thing I would say that would be relevant to this audience is I believe the Democratic Party has ceded rural America to the Republicans, and in particular to Trump world. My county, Fulton County, Pennsylvania, and South Central Pennsylvania votes 85% Trump. There's just no planning. There's no outreach. There's no insight. There's no attempt on the part of the Democratic Party to reach my neighbors. They're reachable. They're open. But the best example I can give you is along the routes that run through Fulton County on the way, let's say, to Baltimore, where I'd be delivering produce to Goucher College. Trump world, every 10 miles or even 5 miles, make sure to have a sign on Route 16 or Route 30. The Democrats don't do that. They charge $5 to $10 a sign. They don't go out and try and reach rural America. And I just don't see where, not to use a relevant rural word, seichel, wisdom, I don't see seichel on the part of the Democratic Party in an attempt to reach out to my neighbors and rural people generally. I think they've ahead of the time ceded rural America to the Republicans and to the right wing. And as an example, I'll give you an interesting example right now. The one icon to a lot of you, which although I find a little bit difficult relating to your world, you probably all know who John Deere is. I mean, through advertising, through Nothing Runs Like a Deer, it's rural America. So Trump.
Well, there's a radical pacifist priest named John Deere. He spells it DEAR, but he is there. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to point out that 80,000 jobs in hard-fought areas of this country are being ceded to Mexico because John Deere, I'm curious if anyone even knows this, John Deere is moving to Mexico. Did anybody out there?
The tractor manufacturer?
The company is closing down its plants in Illinois, Iowa, whatever, and buying land right now in Mexico. There's 80,000 Americans involved in jobs that they'll all lose. And any awareness among any progressives in the Democratic Party who look at this as an incredible area of protest, awareness, and objection? I don't think there are. And I think it comes as a surprise that the icon of the American farmer, John Deere, is moving out of the country to Mexico. It would be a good item on the Trump agenda, but I suspect it's not even on the Democratic Party agenda. I could be wrong, but I don't
No,
think
you're
so.
probably, well, as someone that's put in here, corporate Dems run the DNC, there's no doubt about that. So you've actually opened the door for something that really, really is important to me, is that I studied and I wrote my first book in part about the populists in the rural populists and small p. And then they had capital P, the Populist Party. And the Populist Party was semi-socialistic. They were very pro-female, pro-right to vote.
Sure,
They wanted they wanted to nationalize the banks. They wanted to use food as the basis of currency. So these people were very left, and they actually united black and white farmers for the first time in history. Actually, it was the second time, but anyway, so they today the media uses the term populist as an interface with fascists. And it really angers me because the populist farmers were great, great people. And they really pioneered American democracy in the 20th century. They gave way and joined in the beginning with the socialists from the cities, Eugene V. Debs and the radical left union movement. And but today, this term, along with the ignorant, the deaf ear turn to people in the rural areas, has become hallmark of the Democratic Party. And it's really, and of course, you know, the Republican elite couldn't care less about people in the rural areas. I mean, you know, it's just a sham. But there you have it. So how do you explain this?
Well, the swing states, I mean, Wisconsin, a strong, populist, left populist state, is an important swing state. And again, I don't think that's a way. Hey, my world is raising zucchini, basil, watermelon. This is not my world. My world is just wonderment at where the leadership is in the Democratic Party. Presumably, Mike Hirsch, who I know because he's been active in PDA, and I've been active in progressive politics, but in Maryland, not Pennsylvania. There's just no awareness of that kind of left populism coming from the Democratic Party. So that's the best I could do. Not being knowledgeable on a national level, just knowing it's not felt on the grassroots level. Trump and the Trumpists have the ground game when it comes to organizing and being populist. That's what's so sad. And again, I'm a Bernie supporter, and my neighbors, the volunteer fire department, the emergency medical technician, people that I knew and worked with, they all know I'm a leftist. They all know where I'm coming from. In fact, they'll give Bernie a lot more credibility than they will Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
They connect more with Bernie's honesty and democratic socialism in some odd ways. I just think we've missed the boat when it comes to making those connections. The LaFollette connections could have been built upon, and maybe was it Toby Moffett who was
Connecticut? He was in Connecticut.
Oh, no, then I'm not thinking of Toby Moffett, but there was senator briefly from Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Oh, Paul Wellstone.
So Wellstone was the last progressive left Democrat I came in contact with, and he had a lot of knowledge about that kind of grassroots populism. That's been lost, I think.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. It's infuriating. I will tell you one small story. I lived in Columbus for many years, and I used to go down to rural Southern Ohio, and I had a friend there who was from Manhattan and an anti-war guy but he was totally into plants. Maybe even Sobel, Paul Strauss, and he he went into rural southeastern Ohio, and they just hated him. He was just a hardcore hippie. And then you know how he won him over? He became a huge hero in southeastern Ohio, rural near Athens, outside of Athens, where the Ohio University is. He taught them all how to grow pot, and they saved their farms. And the southeastern Ohio became like the Emerald Triangle, and a very substantial part of the agricultural income in southeastern Ohio was pot because of him. I always loved
on my on one of my old implements on my farm, there's a notation for hemp, which is what was grown commercially for till what 40, 50 years ago. It was used, and my difficulty is this: I cannot believe there's not more sophistication in some think tank in Washington, D.C., and more awareness of this issue, other than ceding it to Trump territory and Trump people who do know how to reach out to grassroots people and do it very well. And the only thing I've been a little bit taken aback by, thinking about the possibilities who to match up with Kamala, is the possibility, since all my neighbors know I'm Jewish, and that it's not an objection to any of them, and it's a plus when it comes to people like Fetterman, who goes overboard, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Israel and Zionism. But there is an acceptance, which makes me think, next to Pete Buttigieg, that our governor has some strong possibilities in openly being an open Jew, has the first kosher kitchen in Harrisburg. The previous Jewish governor changed his name from Shapiro to Shap. So,
right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's open. He's out there in terms of his Jewish identity.
Kamala's husband is Jewish.
That's true. Yeah. So there's that. Even though there's anti-Semitism, it's true. I've come across it indirectly. It's open territory. I would have considered the person that I was close with personally, Jamie Raskin, an ideal.
No, they won't do him.
Candidate, but he's not from a state that's going to contribute anything, as to what one of your commentators said. But Shapiro is. Shapiro has good cred among rural right-wing Trump supporters when I put him out as a name.
Wow, that's weird. That's interesting. Myla Reeson, you want to jump in with Michael Tabor? Myla?
Absolutely. Thank you, Harvey. And Michael, thank you for being here. Mike Hirsch, thank you for inviting Michael. I'm an avid gardener. I've grown food for 50 years now. And I love talking about growing food and growing food sustainably. And you mentioned hemp. I just want to put a little factoid in. I was just putting it in the chat. I just recently read that 1 acre of hemp grown in a single season can yield as much paper as up to 4 acres of trees. So that's pretty remarkable. But I'd like to talk about a documentary film that I saw years ago that I thought made a really important statement with respect to growing food sustainably. It was produced by Eva Longoria, called The Harvest, and this documentary tracked the families of 4 families whose children were laboring in our fields of plenty. as it were. And it shows them from early in the season until the very end of the season. And at the end of the film, in one of the last very poignant segments, we see this young man, Victor, who's has younger sisters and parents who have been disabled because they have been exposed to these horrible chemicals that are used to produce food in this country. And young Victor talks about how he is overcome by the toxic fumes, but he has to keep going because he is the sole provider for his parents and his younger sisters. And for me, it really profoundly shows us the importance of how these chemicals that are used are impacting the people who work in the fields. They're impacting ourselves. You know, people always often say, well, you know, I'm feeling fine, but it does impact personal health. It impacts the health of the planet, and the chemical companies that are producing these horrible toxic chemicals are using the profits to influence our political system. All those dots are connected. And so I think, you know, we really have to think that in terms of a perspective of why we buy sustainably grown food. There's so many reasons why. It's not just the impact on your personal health. And you may say that it's a little bit more expensive. I don't have a lot of money. I always find a way somehow not to buy food that is grown with chemicals and pesticides. So anyway, thank you for giving me an opportunity to get on my soapbox, because
Yeah, no, it's a good soapbox. Mike might remember it's almost got to be taken with a sense of humor. For years, I pushed an attempt to get atrazine banned. Atrazine is the most widely used chemical here in Maryland, in soybeans and corn. It's impossible to get it banned. And if you want to learn more about it, go to New Yorker and atrazine, an article on an attempt to get it banned and stop being used, in fact, in Berkeley, where they had a laboratory to test it, and what they found out was how destructive and harmful it was and still is. So we gave up when it came to trying to get atrazine banned in Maryland. The PFAS is fascinating. An anti-PFAS bill passed this year in Maryland, and that's something that shows you there's an awareness that could be created that does get harmful products like that out of circulation. I don't know, you know, again, this is an audience that's open to things. If there's any other, I guess you've got.
Well, there has been, Maya and I both knew Michael Franz, and you know, he worked against glyphosate, and we have won some big, we haven't, but I mean, there've been some successful lawsuits against glyphosates, and there's also the campaign against the the nicotine-based neonics who kill the bees. So, you know, there is some awareness, and we do win some victories. Mike Hirsch,
can I just
go on? Go ahead, Mike.
Quickly, I did an annotated documentary of Stephen Franz talking about glyphosate, and I will put a link to it in the chat.
Yeah, Stephen Franz is a great guy. By the way, since you mentioned movies, I'm going to go to Mike Hirsch in a minute. He brought you Stephen, but Lori Grace suggested a movie called Aftermath about the Christian right. There's another one called Bad Faith that I watched. It was pretty good, and narrated by Peter Coyote. There's another one called Against All Enemies, in I'll put those in the chat, actually, those titles. Go ahead, Mike Hirsch.
Yeah, thanks, Sluggo. I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction to
Yeah,
for Mike
sorry about
Tabor.
that. I jumped ahead of you.
No, that's okay. We were in a little bit of a hurry, but we do things in our own order. We don't listen to everybody else, so
Right.
we march to our own tune, obviously. But Mike, I don't know how long we've known each other, but it's been quite a while, and you've impressed me as long as I've known you. You've always spoken your mind. You've always been a very honest and ethical person. Sluggo just mentioned a movie called Bad Faith. You're always in good faith. And, we've walked the halls in the Maryland state government trying to get a ban on atrazine. What I've learned is that if you ban one compound, they combine it with another one and claim that the ban doesn't apply to it. So it's a real whack-a-mole situation. But atrazine is absolutely horrible. It causes genetic damage to human beings and to animals and to plant life. It just needs to be banned. And the fact that we can't get it done even in Maryland just shows there's an organization called the Farm Bureau, which does the easy way, unlike the way non-chemical farmers. I want to make sure that I'm up to date. I'm used to saying organic, but that does have kind of the upscale connotation. And we do want to make sure that people are able to eat healthy food free from chemicals and toxins. And one of the things, Mike Tabor, that you do is you make healthy food available to working and poor people. You take it into city centers and make your food available to people. And I thank you for that. You also helped launch Jamie Raskin's political career in your living room, I believe. If you wanted to just tell us that anecdote. We've had Jamie on a few times on the Zoom, and pretty much everybody here thinks he's terrific. I don't want to speak for everybody, but his reception has always been really positive. We wouldn't have Representative Jamie Raskin if we didn't have a state senator, Jamie Raskin, before that. And Mike and a few other people launched Jamie's political career. And Jamie helped launch PDA. And so, of course, PDA has been behind Jamie every step of the way with everything that he's been trying to do. But I just wanted to highlight a few other things. Mike, you were also on the Montgomery County Civil Rights Commission back before there was a National Civil Rights Act. I don't want to date you, but I think, we aren't a lot of young people on this Zoom. We've got like a 40-year-old who's our youth advocate here. But you were a champion there, and I understand that you were dismissed because you took your job too seriously. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for you taking time to talk to us. And believe me, this is your crowd. This is the audience that really wants to hear everything you have to say. So I'll shut up and let you go on presenting. But I just want everybody to know Mike Tabor is a very rare individual, is a wonderful guy, incredible personal history, who's walked the walk every step of the way.
I don't know how much of that is deserved, but I nagged Jamie to run, is what I did. I nagged him for 2 years to, in addition to teaching constitutional law, to test it out by running for a government office with the notion that integrity deserves a spot in politics. That was the point I kept on making. And when I make that point in Pennsylvania, they think I'm a nutcase. They really just assume that by definition, people who run for political office don't have integrity, don't have solid beliefs that outweigh making money. They just don't, they're incredulous when I say, no, if you push people with integrity to run and then support them, we could be successful. So I sound like some naive nutcase when I say that to my neighbors. And it really is people like my wife, Esther, in the other room that give Jamie the support of the population that got him elected and keep him in power. That's why Jamie is in the position he's in. Support of his neighbors, his support of people, and support of people that that run for office and get support from their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
That won the, I was told by the author of that article in Lancaster Farming, that won some kind of award. I don't know what it was, for best article in something or other of the year in Pennsylvania. And so those shots very quickly are our farm. And if anyone has any sons, daughters, grandchildren who want to learn farming, we're, I suppose that's an advertisement. If we want to continue, that's what we need. What I originally wrote about and Mike picked up on was the concept of of revising the image of farmers so that young people, the next generation, would want to farm, that it would be respectable, and it would be a career that could lead to a future that's positive. So that's my ad. And
That's great. It looks fabulous. So let's go Wendy, Steve, and Tatanka. Contrary to what you thought, Steve, Mike, this is a very simpatico audience. Wendy, go ahead.
I'm surprised. I got to say, you're right.
There you go. Wendy, go ahead, and Steve and Mike, and then Tatanka.
Thank you. I had a couple of points about some of the things we were talking about a little while ago, but I did want to just mention to Michael and say thank you for being with us. But my friend, our friend Maya Van Rossum, who wrote the Green Amendments book, she's behind all the state amendments for amending the state constitutions to give rights of nature. She's up in Pennsylvania. She's one of the founders of the Delaware Waterkeepers. So I'm happy to connect you with her. She's usually on with us, but I'm more than happy to connect you if you like. I'm one of the co-conveners here.
It's the most supportive group when we were fighting atrazine that I have ever seen. The Waterkeepers Alliance were really good.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we never got anything passed, but Waterkeepers was really good as grassroots.
Well, I think, the fights, the successful fights against, well, not successful yet, but the nicotine crap, and then the glyphosates. I mean, you should be, moving ahead, hopefully. But go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. Yeah, she's phenomenal. They're phenomenal. So I'm glad you guys are connected. You were talking before about the lack of reach out to the rural communities, to the people on the ground, the grassroots. And I experienced that. I'm in Florida right now. I'm in Miami. I'm actually just outside of Miami in the largest Cuban population outside of Cuba. And our state just passed a law that prohibits any kind of heat regulation. So we have, heat that feels like well into the hundreds because the humidity, it feels really hot. And I've worked many outdoor jobs. I was petitioning last year, and at least with petitions and doing farm, if you need to take a break, you're able to. I can't imagine what it's like for these people that aren't allowed a 10-minute shade break or water, and nobody is really standing up to it. I'm thinking about Ohio with Norfolk Southern, all these different instances where the corporations have like literally more value than human beings and human lives, and there's nobody coming to their defense. And same thing, I mean, just a lot of the candidates right now, which, I mean, it seems to be an elephant in the room that people don't want to talk about. And I'll just preface with saying that my dad was a kosher butcher for 50 years. So, I mean, I'm coming from that, but he would not stand to see what's happening right now with our foreign affairs and what we're exporting, the violence that we're supporting with our tax dollars instead of bringing health care and, you know, subsidies for hemp farmers. It used to be illegal to not grow hemp, you know? So it's really, I mean, there has to be something, because I feel like, you know, I watched the Democrats let DeSantis and Rick Scott walk into office. By the way that they handled the election and the recount, they literally allowed them to win. And I think that's what's happening right now. If you really take a step back and look at all the things that could and should be done, and they're just not, it's like someone's leaving the back door open and they're trying to throw the fight. But I appreciate everything that you're doing, and like, feel free to reach out if to work with Maya or anybody else that what we're doing, and also the audits of elections and making sure that we have ballot scans to make sure that, you know, when you have a ballot on an amendment on the ballot, that corporations aren't coming in and making sure that the votes aren't being counted or whatever it is, and all the uprisings that could happen because of these seeds that are being planted within civil society to fight each other instead of the poisoners and the fascists. So anyway, thank you. Sorry, my point came from a while back in the conversation.
Thank you for being proud of your heritage of the kosher butcher father. It's good that you hold that in esteem.
I'm proud of him, but I don't know what else I'm proud of, to be honest. Thank you, though. He was a good man.
All right. Thank you. Steve Caruso and then Tatanka, and then we're almost out of time. So go ahead, Steve. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah. Hold on a second here. Trying to run the show and talk at the same time. I can't chew gum. There you go. So my grandfather was an organic farmer, you know, back in the day. He had sold worms in the Organic Farming magazine back in 1947. Okay, the date hemp was banned was 1936. So right now, farmers are allowed to grow hemp in the United States, but there's no money being invested in infrastructure. What are the farmers that side with Trump getting from the Department of Agriculture on a regular basis as subsidies? They're all getting subsidies, but is Trump giving it to them? They don't understand that. I doubt it, you know, and we need to subsidize not soybeans and corn, but hemp, because that is more prolific in terms of industrial use, oils, fiber, trees, paper. You go down the whole gamut there. It's unbelievable. You can't do the same thing with soybeans and corn. And we did have a win with 2,4-D has been banned. It's not atrazine. Those are two different things. But 2,4-D was recently banned, but in somewhat a limited fashion, but on major farms, I think it is, and they have to totally just get rid of all their stocks, what's left over, how much we don't know. So thanks for everything you're doing, Michael. You're doing a great job.
But again, we need to get progressive Democrats in position of power so that they have influence at USDA. It's just not of interest to most Democrats. We need to have people who are Democratic left-wing populists on wherever the funding source is on the Hill. They shouldn't just opt for EPA. They should opt into the tradition of, because, you know, I accidentally came across a little newspaper clip on my desk, and it referred to a conference I went to 50 years ago. And the conference note said 50 years ago, there was still 100,000 Jewish farmers actively farming in this country. So that was as of 50 years ago. It was a noble calling. It really was. We've just lost it, and we've ceded it to the Republicans and the right wing. And that's the Shonda.
I don't know. I mean, they're getting money. How much subsidies? Every farmer gets subsidies from the federal government. I can guarantee it, right?
We've turned off. we've turned away all the subsidies. You're right.
You have.
Yeah, we got subsidies for not growing oats, things we wouldn't have grown anything anyway.
But what
So
about the rest of the farmers in the rural areas saying that are
they
going Trump?
grab, a lot of them are former undersecretaries at USDA. The one time I did speak at the Ag Forum, a national event that takes place once a year, there was an outspoken denunciation of former undersecretaries at USDA, all of whom earned millions of dollars by not farming and being responsible for getting that legislation passed.
Take that money to not grow crops to grow hemp instead. Let's make the switch there, flip it.
Well, there, you know who the principal hemp growers in America were Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. They wrote each other about hemp. They liked hemp. There's no indication they smoked it, by the way. If you look at the correspondence between Washington and Jefferson about growing hemp, they don't say, "Hey, man, this shit was really good." They just say, they love raising hemp as opposed to tobacco. Tobacco is really hard to raise, but hemp is easy. The joke about hemp is you put a seed in the ground, and in the fall you get a 10-foot plant and a 6-foot federal agent. But now, it's not the case anymore. And here we legalized pot after 50 years of shrieking and yelling, and what happened? Nothing. There's no wild in the streets, none of that stuff. But and same with organic food. I will tell you, I was on a hippie farm for 14 years, and we were visited by Rodale himself, Rob, who must be close to you. You're in your emails, no? And it was a great thing. It was the first decision we made on our farm was to not use chemicals, and we never did. It was great.
You could Google this, but the senior Rodale, unfortunately, who was a democratic socialist, actually he was democratic.
J.I. Rodale.
He died on, was it the Johnny Carson show?
No, Dick Cavett.
Dick Cavett. And when I delivered, at one point, I delivered products to Rodale and was invited into the executive cafeteria. And I was thrown out of the executive cafeteria. I was introduced to his son. And my comment was, sadly, I think your father would be disappointed in you because he started to make organic farming worthy of common people eating it, not an elite, not a WASP elite. And he asked me to leave the dining room.
Wow.
And
there you go.
He didn't go in his father's direction. His father really was an inspiration, and not so for the younger Rodale. Who knew there'd be any interest in this stuff? So
totally, and we had a woman at the farm named Kathy Rogers, and she said, "You're not putting chemicals on my garden," and we didn't, and that was it. We didn't know anything about what we were doing. Kathy, she said, "No, don't do it."
Just a little food for thought here that I'd love to get in, so to speak.
And then we'll go to Tatanka.
When you go to Costco, when you get food delivered from your local grocery chain, it's a little bit problematic. Really, you should pick a farmer's market that serves working class people, the general population, not the wealthy. And you should also encourage people, in your community to think about encouraging their own children, if not themselves, to be working on farms. So what you did in your youth was an inspiration. Obviously, it made you what you are to some extent, brought you that home that looks like it's pretty well off sitting on that background.
Oh, that's all electronic, man.
Sorry.
We're good. We're good. No, it's okay.
But I do want to say one more thing. My background, even though I've been farming for 53 years in Pennsylvania, is growing up in Fort Greene Housing Project in Brooklyn.
Wow.
So my background is pure, solid working class, and that's what I identify with. And my wife, who is laughing, has an incredible Flushing accent. And So we're New Yorkers. It's pure happenstance that I find myself farming, probably because I kept on getting fired from other jobs. So
there you go.
So
Good for you.
it's a great story, and I appreciate the fact that you guys waited around and some of you stayed to hear me talk.
We still have 45 people on this call. I mean,
That's
as I
correct.
say, our people on the GREEP calls have the longest attention span of anybody in America. It's really great. Tatanka, speaking of long attention spans, and we're going to go in 5 minutes. So let's wrap.
Okay, Michael Tabor, I want to thank you for coming on. There's a lot more interest than you even sense. I mean, even among people who know me well, don't know my history with food, and my family and my whole extended family's interest in the garden and that whole process. And through the late 60s to late 70s, the political people lived in East Palo Alto, and we had our own little food conspiracy, and then we took over a 7-Eleven to have an actual business of organic foods for those of us, etc. The hippie people, I was part of negotiations with a man who owned land up behind the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence. We were all draft resistors that got together around Joan Baez and David Harris, and we had a community called the Land for 10 years up on Skyline above where Joan lived and between the Doobie Brothers and Neil Young, you know, up there in the hills. Yeah, and about 70 people who built the homes from all the lumber that was part of building Highway 280 at that time to go down through the Bay Area, etc. So they would come down and join our picket lines during the week. We would go up and skinny dip nude and, you know, have a longhouse band and have music. And it was just a wonderful existence for 10 years. And also during that time, I was very active with the farm workers and the organic movement within the United Farm Workers and their personal stories of pesticides, etc. So I'm lobbying for another show where we devote a good amount of time and invite you back, because I have friends who have witnessed the corporate takeover, people who have been instrumental in the organic movement in California, and much to their chagrin, even fighting it. Now, you know, the Department of Agriculture is totally corporate captured, and we need to take that back. There's a group of us that for 4 years has been working on a government in waiting document of all 15 cabinet positions, 8 agency positions, principles, policies, and programs of the government we'd like to live in. And it will be ready to go. And I choose to believe, despite all odds, right? On the bigger picture, it sort of seems like we're this crypto-fascist Nazism, you know, religiosity, Christian nation is some sort of, we can slip into thinking that they're more powerful than we are when we have the numbers. And, you know, who knows, in the course of history, it could be an ongoing, it won't go away right away because there will be violence, as our speaker indicated, but we may be going into a period where the last gasp of this kind of corporate takeover of the world, it will be an extended struggle. But I choose to believe that that's the course of history we're on, that the arc bends toward justice, and we can put our faith in that. And I just would love to have a whole segment on this and have you come back, and I would bring some of my friends who people don't even know about that I think would also have something to say about it.
So I just want to introduce my wife, Esther. So this is Esther Siegel. We have one of our proud pictures is of Cesar Chavez blessing our daughter, because I worked on the Great Boycott. And so Esther probably won't reveal her Flushing accent.
I don't have a Flushing.
You do have a Flushing. But yeah, I'd be glad to explore this more, especially the connection with the left, the 60s, the La Folie populists, and how much we've gone, sadly, in the wrong direction, allowing the Trumpites to take control of parts of rural America that could be our territory. There are
Yes.
people with I
And-
used the word seichel, it's a Yiddish word, or is it yeah, it means intelligence, smarts. Had we had the seichel,
Common sense.
Well, that was the real name of the picture, Satchel Paige. It was actually Seichel Paige. Yeah, I got, did you want to say something, Tatanka? And we're gonna let people
Well,
go.
just that our future, we can't go forward without making things right with the indigenous people, the African American, et cetera. We can't go forward without reclaiming our healthy soils, making them healthy, growing ourselves healthy. It's an inside out proposition. And we are killing ourselves with this corporate agriculture business. And so it's foundational. It's foundational for the society we all choose to live in. And without it, we won't be the healthy society we need to sustain ourselves. So it's really, really important. I'm glad you showed up. And thanks, Mike Hirsch, for introducing him, and thanks, Harvey, for having him on.
Hey, it's been great. Michael, my first book was Harvey Wasserman's History of the United States, and the populist chapter you'd find interesting. So I put my email in the chat, solartopia@me.com. And if you email me, I'll send you a PDF of the book. Steve Caruso, thanks for engineering. Mike Hirsch, thanks for your great work. Wendy, this has been another phenomenal call. I think all our calls are phenomenal. Next week, we're going to have Christian Nunez, thanks to Mike Hirsch, president of the National Organization for Women. Karen Greenberg, who's a tremendous writer and thinker. She's a professor at Fordham. She has a new book out. And who knows what else? It's always great, always interesting.
Hey, Sluggo.
Yes,
we're
Mike.
we're also going to have Maryland delegate Linda Foley, one of our legislators, who's a terrific progressive, and Mike Tabor, you might know her, but she's been a